friends, welcome back to my channel. Today I have a graphic novel to share with you. I recently read George Takei's They Called Us Enemy Expanded Edition graphic novel. I had a comment on my March graphic novel trilogy telling me to read this, and I finally got a hold of it from my local library. It took me a long time to get it, and I swallowed it in one go. It was really interesting to read, so let's go ahead and get into it. Essentially, the premise of this is it focuses on the Japanese American internment that happened during World War II. For those of you who don't know a lot about that topic, basically once Pearl Harbor happened, the attacks at Pearl Harbor, the United States entered World War II and made Japan their #1 enemy. And even after Germany resigned from the war and admitted defeat, Japan doubled down and was like, no, we're in this, we're still doing this. And so then it became a battle between America and Japan on Japanese soil, ultimately leading in the defeat of Japan after 2 atomic bombs were dropped, the only 2 that have been used during a wartime, which was at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I know a lot about that topic because I teach Hiroshima in my classroom. We read that really compelling story, and no matter your feelings on whether it was right or wrong to drop those atomic bombs, it's still important to hear the stories of those who lived through that, the victims of that bombing. And while all of that was going on foreign soil in America, in our own country, there was legal jurisdiction passed to round up Japanese Americans because there was an accepted belief that they were going to divulge secrets to Japan and they would not remain loyal to America during World War II. Super weird. That whole thing is super weird, and I don't feel like we as a country talk a lot about it because we know how wrong in hindsight that whole thing was. We just kind of shoo it under the rug. If this topic interests you, before I actually talk about the graphic novel, I do suggest you read the nonfiction Farewell to Manzanar, because that nonfiction piece is very interesting and very captivating, and it sheds light on the trauma and dehumanization those people, our own citizens, were made to feel during World War II. So that's a whole thing. But this graphic novel, this is the story of George Takei, whose family lived in these camps during World War II. He was a very young boy. I believe he was less than 10 when his mother and him and his brother and sister were rounded up, taken out of California, and brought eventually to Arkansas to live on a camp. And in the course of his memoir, his graphic novel here, they spent 4 years in internment, which means 4 years of his childhood was spent behind barbed wires, even though he was born in America and he was a Japanese American citizen. So it's very powerful. The illustrations, you're getting it from a young boy's perspective, and I think that's really powerful. And the imagery and the illustrations and the wording of it, I think, really highlight the trauma that a young boy would experience, but also the resiliency of children, which I think is really powerful. So I like the storytelling of it. I thought it was really well done. It flies. You fly right through this. And I will say, similarly to March, it bounces back and forth between going through some present day things that George talks about, like from his adulthood, and then flashing back to his time in internment. But as a criticism, I will say it's not as fluid. I feel like the way March was able to bounce back and forth was very clear to the reader, and it was also what felt like very intentional, where I feel like sometimes here the intention wasn't as powerful or wasn't as evident for why are we going here, why are we going back. It took a little bit of adjusting to figure out why we just changed times and going back and forth. The other criticism that I will say is right at nearly the tail end of the graphic novel, it ping-pongs to January 2008 with Obama's inauguration, and then it switches to June 2018, and it says, old outrages have begun to resurface with brutal results. And they have, this little girl behind barbed wire, and I know what they're referring to, but then you flip to the next page and now you're back in 1942. So I feel like this, what they were trying to get at here, I get that, but I think it rested too much on the reader knowing this allusion, this reference, and it doesn't really go beneath the surface enough to really like take the stance they're trying to make. So it just falls flat. So I feel like while the information about the Japanese internment is powerful and it's a really important thing for people to learn about, and it's important for our country to not shy away from the bad behavior that it engaged in during that time, I feel like there were some missteps overall where they could have been more intentional or more powerful beyond what they've already accomplished. So in the end, I would definitely say this is a graphic novel worth reading. If you read this and you're interested in the topic and you're looking more for like a nonfiction novel, I recommend Farewell to Manzanar. Very, very powerful. And they were in the Manzanar camp, which was a bigger camp than what George Takei found himself in. But overall, definitely think it's worth a read. I sat down in like one evening, read this whole thing. That's kind of like what I love about graphic novels, is when they're really good, you can just churn through it. And even if they're not like soul sucking, like taking all of your energy and taking all of your focus, you can still read them really quickly. So definitely a read for me. I'm curious to know your thoughts on this topic / your thoughts on this graphic novel. And if you have any other nonfiction graphic novels, please drop them down below for me, because I'm on the hunt for more. I'm really into the nonfiction graphic novel at this moment. All right, guys, that is it for me and this book review. I hope you enjoyed hearing my thoughts, and I look forward to sharing with you more thoughts in a future upcoming